The sun was beginning its descent behind the jagged peaks of the mountains, casting an orange glow across the landscape. A lone man trudged along a narrow mountain trail, the thin, crisp air filling his lungs with each breath he took surrounding him. The towering rock formations jutted upward like ancient sentinels, their surfaces rugged and stained with the elements of time. The path beneath his feet was uneven and littered with loose stones, a reminder of nature's unfinished business. A beautiful, yet treacherous invitation into the wild. As he ventured deeper, the serenity of the wilderness began to veil a sense of foreboding. Tall grasses danced in the gentle breeze, whispering secrets, while shadows cast by looming trees promised both shelter and concealment. The vibrant colors of wildflowers dotted the landscape, creating an enchanting scene that could lull any passerby into tranquility. However, a seasoned hiker like him recognized this alluring beauty as a deceptive facade. Hidden among these picturesque mountains lay dangers unseen. Only hours before, he had reveled in the feeling of freedom, but now he sensed an unsettling quiet enveloping him. The usual sounds of chirping birds had stilled, replaced by an eerie silence that prickled at his skin. With every step he took, an acute awareness surged through him. He was not alone. Animal tracks dotted the soft earth beside him, signs of creatures who called this wild expanse home. The majestic mountains had their secrets, and now they seemed to be tightening their grip on him. The man glanced nervously over his shoulder as uncertainty gnawed at his mind. In this captivating yet perilous landscape, where beauty met unpredictability, he was about to discover just how wild nature could be, and it would change everything. Mark had always felt a deep connection to nature, an unexplainable pull that drew him away from the chaos of city life. The mountains represented a sanctuary for him, a place to escape, reflect, and recharge. He cherished the peace that came from hiking solo, believing it granted him clarity amidst life's distractions. Today's hike had been meant as a personal retreat, a chance to reconnect with himself and clear his mind after a grueling week at work. As he navigated the winding paths, however, Mark's sense of freedom quickly morphed into anxiety. Despite his experience, he had underestimated the vastness of this wilderness and the challenge it posed. One moment, he had been following a well-trodden trail. The next, he was disoriented, surrounded by unfamiliar terrain that disoriented his bearings. As twilight began to shroud the mountaintops, panic began to seep in. At first, he attempted to retrace his steps, glancing back at landmarks that had once guided him. With each passing moment, frustration mounted as familiar sights faded into the encroaching darkness. The whispering winds seemed to carry taunts, reminding him of the isolation he had sought to escape. The realization struck him with a heavy weight. He was lost, alone in a vast expanse that offered both wonder and danger. His heart raced as shadows danced around him. Uncertainty clawed at his mind. Was it too late to find his way back? The once beautiful landscape now felt like a maze filled with unseen threats. With every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig, Mark's breath quickened as dread settled in this moment of vulnerability. He understood how easily one could be swallowed by the very beauty they sought to embrace. It was just him against the wild now, a battle between survival and despair. Just as the shadows began to stretch and deepen, a low, guttural sound broke the silence that enveloped Mark. His instincts kicked in. Something was watching him. Emerging from behind the thick underbrush, a pack of wild hyenas appeared, their lithe bodies gliding effortlessly through the fading light. With their distinctive spotted coats and tufted manes, they formed an almost surreal vision against the backdrop of the dusky mountains. The hyenas weren't just a random encounter. They were a closely knit group, displaying an uncanny sense of teamwork and communication. Their laughter-like calls echoed off the rocks, filling the air with a haunting melody that both fascinated and terrified him. Each member of the pack varied in size, but all shared an alertness and cunning characteristic of their kind. Sharp ears perked and noses twitching, they were intensely curious about this solitary figure who had wandered into their territory. As Mark struggled to regain his bearings, he noticed how they moved in synchrony around him, circling slowly but deliberately. Their keen eyes studied his every move. He could almost feel their gazes penetrating his very being. Although he had always viewed them as fearsome predators, he now found himself captivated by their graceful movements and social dynamics. In this moment of heightened awareness, Mark's earlier anxiety shifted slightly to a mix of awe and apprehension. Mark clutched a nearby sapling for support, his heart pounding in rhythm with the pulse of the wilderness. He wondered what their intentions were they merely curious or sizing him up as potential prey? With no clear escape route in sight, he felt both vulnerable and inexplicably drawn to their wild beauty. This unexpected encounter with nature's untamed spirit had only begun to unfold, and he realized that everything he thought he knew about these creatures was about to be challenged. As the hyenas closed in, Mark's pulse quickened, his earlier morphing into a raw panic that coursed through him like wildfire. Their playful, laughter-like calls now echoed ominously in his ears, amplifying his sense of vulnerability with each step they took, circling him like a predator stalks its prey. He felt the weight of isolation pressing down harder. The balance he had momentarily found between fear and fascination teetered dangerously off-kilter. Mark instinctively looked for an escape route, but the dense thicket around him offered no sanctuary. His breaths came out in shallow gasps as the realization hit him. He was surrounded by efficient hunters that moved with graceful precision and lethal intent. The flicker of twilight painted their spotted pelts in ethereal hues, amplifying the oddly beautiful but disturbing sight before him. They still hadn't shown aggression, yet every instinct screamed for him to flee. A new sense of dread washed over him as he recalled stories of fearless hyenas, known not just for their cunning but for their fierce pack mentality. Would they see him as an intruder to be driven away or as an opportunity? Mark gripped the sapling tightly, its rough bark digging into his palm as he fought against rising panic to maintain focus. He wondered if reasoning with them was possible or if it was foolish to imagine he could communicate with wild beasts that thrived on instinct. The gap closed further as the pack moved closer together, their curiosity morphing into a palpable tension that hung in the air. Mark felt exposed and vulnerable, aware that one wrong move could trigger an unpredictable response from the vibrant creatures encircling him. Doubt flooded his mind. Was this wilderness retreat meant for clarity, or had it led him into a conflict between life and death? As the shadows darkened around him, Mark understood that this moment would define not just his struggle for survival but also his perception of nature's beauty and brutality intertwined. As the tension in the air thickened, Mark braced himself for the worst. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of launching into an attack, the hyenas paused and began to engage in playful antics among themselves. One young hyena, seemingly emboldened by curiosity, bounded forward a few paces before darting back to its companions with a series of excited yips, as if inviting them to join in a game. This light-hearted display caught Mark off guard. He had always associated hyenas with menace and aggression, but now he was witnessing a side of them that felt almost whimsical. The pack began to frolic around him, their movements fluid and agile. They playfully nipped at each other's tails and rolled on the ground in mock battles, their laughter-like calls echoing through the trees. Mark's heart still raced from adrenaline, but he couldn't help but feel a flicker of intrigue at their behavior. He watched as one particularly bold hyena approached him cautiously, stopping just a few feet away and tilting its head as if trying to understand this strange creature that had invaded its territory. The initial fear that had gripped him began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of fascination. He noticed the distinct personalities within the pack. Some were playful and curious, while others maintained a more watchful stance. In those moments, Mark realized that these animals were not just ruthless predators. They were social beings with their own forms of communication and interaction. As he stood there absorbing this unexpected twist in his encounter, Mark felt an odd connection forming between himself and the pack. The hyenas weren't simply circling him out of hunger or malice. They were observing, learning about him as much as he was about them. This shift in perspective opened up his understanding of these often misunderstood creatures, revealing a world where beauty and danger coexisted in a delicate balance. What had begun as a harrowing experience was evolving into something profoundly enlightening, a lesson on empathy amid wildness. As the playful atmosphere lingered, Mark sensed a pivotal moment approaching, a chance to bridge the gap between himself and the hyenas. With his heart still racing, he took a deep breath and decided to respond to their nonverbal cues. Instead of retreating further into fear, he slowly lowered himself to the ground, folding his legs beneath him in a non-threatening posture. This simple act of submission seemed to catch the attention of the pack. One particularly curious hyena moved closer. Its ears perked and head tilted as it observed him with intent. Mark then remembered the way he had seen them interact with one another. He mimicked their laughter-like calls, trying to replicate the sounds that had earlier echoed through the trees. The sound was an experiment, a blend of hesitation and hope, but it resonated in the still air. His astonishment, the hyena responded with a series of excited yips that were almost playful. The rest of the pack paused, their movements momentarily still as they processed this unexpected interaction. Mark felt a rush of warmth as he continued to make soft sounds, watching how their expressions shifted from curiosity to what he interpreted as understanding. It was as if he had spoken a language that transcended words, one that acknowledged their presence and invited them into a shared moment. Encouraged by this connection, Mark extended his hand slowly toward the nearest hyena, palm facing up in a gesture of peace. The hyena hesitated for a heartbeat before inching closer, sniffing the air around him. The tension that had filled the space began to dissipate, replaced by a palpable sense of mutual respect. In that moment, Mark understood he was not simply an intruder in their territory. He was part of this wild tapestry of life. What had begun as an encounter fraught with fear transformed into a profound exchange, an acknowledgement of existence and awareness between two different worlds. Mark realized that communication could be more than words. It could be about connection, respect, and the shared rhythm of life in the wilderness. As the playful exchanges continued, Mark noticed one particularly bold hyena lingering at the edge of the pack. Its fur was slightly scruffed, giving it a rugged appearance that seemed to mark it as a leader. This hyena would often approach him closer than the others, its keen eyes studying him with an intelligence that sparked an unexpected connection. Mark began to name Kira in his mind, imagining a personality behind those bright eyes. Kira's fearless nature became apparent as she ventured nearer during their interactions, responding to Mark's laughter-like sounds with her own point. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden rays through the trees, she playfully nudged Mark's hand with her snout before bouncing back a few steps, inviting him to engage in some kind of game. They began a series of playful gestures. Mark would mimic a bowing motion while Kira would respond with quick footwork, dancing around him in circles. The bond between them deepened during these moments, allowing Mark to perceive the social structures within the pack. He observed how Kira communicated with the other hyenas, issuing soft growls and playful yips that established her authority and prompted them to join in their antics. The others took cues from her confidence, drawing closer and forming a half-circle that watched eagerly as their leader engaged with this strange human. Mark felt privileged to witness this intricate dance of social dynamics unfold before him, a blend of hierarchy and camaraderie. He realized that these creatures were not merely instinctual hunters, they had their own culture of interaction and relationships. In Kira, he found not just an ally but also an ambassador of her world. This unlikely alliance began reshaping Mark's understanding of wildness. He saw strength mingled with vulnerability and playfulness intertwined with survival instincts. What had started as an encounter born from fear transformed into a relationship grounded in respect and mutual curiosity, a testament to nature's ability to forge connections across species. With each passing day spent amongst the hyenas, Mark felt increasingly integrated into their world, discovering lessons in both life and friendship beyond what he had ever imagined. As Mark and Kira continued to deepen their bond, a sudden shift in the atmosphere heralded a looming threat. Dark clouds rolled in rapidly, obscuring the stars and casting an eerie shadow over the landscape. The wind picked up, howling through the trees and sending leaves swirling around them, a warning that nature's fury was about to unleash itself. Mark felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. He knew storms in the mountains could be fierce and unpredictable. Just as the first raindrops began to fall, a low growl rippled through the pack. Kira's demeanor shifted from playful to alert, her body tense as she scanned the surroundings. Mark followed her lead, his instincts kicking in once again. He could see other predators lurking at the edges of the clearing, larger animals drawn by the chaos of the approaching storm. The hyenas' earlier antics were forgotten. Now, survival instincts took precedence as they faced potential danger together. Mark sensed the urgency in Kira's movements as she rallied her pack, issuing sharp yips that communicated a need for unity and focus. Without thinking, Mark joined her efforts, raising his arms and making sounds that echoed Kira's calls. He felt an adrenaline surge as he realized they were now working as a team, each one contributing to their shared survival. The pack instinctively formed a protective semicircle around Mark, their eyes darting towards every rustle in the underbrush. As the storm intensified, they moved closer together, demonstrating an extraordinary display of cooperation. Mark felt both vulnerable and empowered. He was no longer just an outsider but part of a collective effort to fend off danger. In that moment of chaos, He understood that this alliance extended beyond mere curiosity or friendship. It was rooted in instinctual survival. As lightning illuminated the darkening sky, Mark found himself not just facing nature's fury alongside Kira and her pack but also embracing it as an opportunity for solidarity. The bond they had formed proved resilient in adversity, teaching him invaluable lessons about trust and collaboration within the wild tapestry of life. As the storm continued to rage, Mark and Kira instinctively fell into a rhythm, working side by side to navigate the chaos that surrounded them. The rain poured down in sheets, turning the ground into a slippery mess, but in this wild environment, they learned to adapt quickly. Mark's heart raced with adrenaline as he took cues from Kira and her pack. They moved with purpose, weaving between trees and avoiding puddles with an agility that inspired him. At one point, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated a fallen tree that blocked their path. Mark hesitated, eyeing the obstacle warily. Kira approached it first, sniffing curiously before jumping nimbly over the trunk. Encouraged by her confidence, Mark followed her lead, leaping over with surprising ease. Their synchronized movements demonstrated a growing trust. Between them, he relied on Kira's instincts while she seemed to read his intentions, understanding that he was there to support their shared survival. As they pressed forward, they encountered other challenges. A narrow ravine filled with rushing water and jagged rocks. The pack huddled together, chattering softly as if discussing how best to cross. Kira edged closer to the ravine's edge, testing the footing before returning to Mark and nudging him gently with her snout. It was a clear invitation. She wanted him to follow her lead, just as she had before. With a deep breath, Mark took a step closer to Kira and studied the terrain. He noticed patches of solid ground along the sides that they could use for leverage. Together, they made their way across, carefully maintaining balance as they hopped from rock to rock. The hyenas watched closely, offering encouragement through soft yips when Mark needed it most. Through these harrowing moments of navigation, trust blossomed between man and hyena. They were no longer simply an outsider and a pack of wild animals. They had become allies navigating danger together. As they emerged from the ravine into clearer ground, Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude for Kira's guidance and for her willingness to forge an unbreakable bond amid adversity. This alliance was more than mere coincidence. It was a testament to the power of collaboration across species, molded by instinct and respect in the face of nature's trials. As the storm began to wane, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, revealing a drenched but resilient wilderness. Mark and Kira stood together, their bodies weary but fueled by a newfound sense of purpose and reliance on one another. The storm had brought them closer, forging a bond that went beyond mere survival. They had become partners facing the trials of nature as a cohesive unit. The sky was still overcast, but the downpour had transformed into a gentle drizzle, which created a soothing sound against the leaves. As they caught their breath, Mark glanced at Kira and saw her attentiveness. She was scanning the area, her ears perked, and he felt an urge to mirror her vigilance. Moments later, his instincts proved right as he noticed movement in the underbrush. A group of larger predators had been drawn by the chaos of the storm and were now cautiously approaching. Kira emitted a low growl, rallying the pack behind her. Mark instinctively stepped closer to her, forming a united front. The hyenas, emboldened by their leader's presence, moved in sync with Kira while Mark matched their pace. Together, they prepared to confront this new threat rather than flee in fear. In a sudden display of teamwork, Kira led her pack in a series of clever maneuvers that distracted the larger predators. They darted from side to side, using speed to confuse and disorient their more cumbersome foes, while Mark contributed by making loud noises to assert their territory. It worked. Together they managed to deter the intruders without escalating into violence. As the larger animals retreated into the forest, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over him. He turned to Kira, whose gaze met his with an unmistakable acknowledgement of their joint victory. In that pivotal moment, both man and hyena recognized their interdependence. Survival was no longer an individual pursuit but a shared journey marked by cooperation and trust. Mark's heart swelled with gratitude. He realized that through this extraordinary encounter with Kira and her pack, he had not only emerged from immediate danger but had also discovered a profound lesson about unity amidst adversity, a vital truth he would carry with him long after leaving this wild place. As Mark made his way back home, the memories of his time with Kira and the hyena pack flooded his mind, each moment leaving an indelible mark on his heart. The landscape, once a daunting labyrinth of uncertainty, now seemed alive with possibilities and lessons learned. He recalled the initial fear that had gripped him upon encountering the pack, a primal instinct that had led him to view these creatures solely as potential threats. Yet, that perspective had shifted dramatically. He realized how easily one could misjudge nature and its inhabitants when driven by fear. Each encounter had peeled back layers of misunderstanding, revealing the complex social dynamics of the hyenas. They were not merely scavengers or ruthless predators, they were intelligent beings with emotions, capable of playfulness and cooperation. As he walked the familiar trail now marked by distant memories of danger and discovery, Mark felt a profound respect for all wild creatures. He understood that vulnerability existed not just in their world but in his own, prompting a new appreciation for coexistence. With each step, he reflected on how this extraordinary experience had changed him. He no longer viewed nature through a lens of dominance. Instead, he embraced a philosophy rooted in empathy and collaboration. The chaos of the storm had transformed into a metaphor for life itself, filled with unpredictability but also opportunities for connection. Mark's thoughts turned to Kira, whose fearless spirit had inspired him. Their shared moments of trust taught him that there is strength in vulnerability. He was reminded that survival often relies on forming bonds across boundaries, be it species or otherwise, and that true respect for nature requires recognizing its inherent complexities. As he reached the outskirts of civilization, Mark felt renewed. His heart swelled with gratitude not only for having emerged from danger but also for having gained wisdom from an unexpected alliance with the wild. His encounter with Kira would forever be etched in his soul, a lasting reminder that danger and beauty often exist side by side in nature's intricate tapestry, one deserving both respect and reverence. Once Mark arrived back in his familiar surroundings, the weight of his experiences settled within him like a profound revelation. He recognized that this transformative journey had not only changed his perception of wildlife but also instilled in him a responsibility toward its conservation. The bond he formed with Kira and the hyenas served as a reminder that all beings have their own roles within the ecosystem, deserving of respect and understanding. Inspired by his encounter, Mark began to contemplate how he could contribute to wildlife conservation efforts. He envisioned sharing his story with others, not just as a thrilling tale of survival but as a lesson in empathy and cooperation concerning nature. He felt compelled to advocate for the protection of habitats that foster relationships like the one he had experienced. Each time he spoke about the hyenas, he would emphasize their intelligence, social structures, and the necessity of preserving their environments. Attending local community meetings and wildlife workshops became a priority for Mark, where he passionately conveyed what he had learned. He spoke about the need to view animals, especially those often misunderstood, through the lens of coexistence rather than fear. His first-hand experience inspired many to reconsider their views on issues surrounding wildlife and sparked discussions about conservation efforts in their region. As time passed, Mark found himself increasingly drawn to advocacy work that promoted education on wildlife behavior, ecology, and conservation. His unique insights provided him with a platform to influence others positively, transforming fear into fascination and reviving respect for the intricate balance between humans and nature. Ultimately, Mark understood that this journey had shifted his path irrevocably. It was no longer just about hiking for personal solace, but about fostering an understanding that would benefit not only himself but also the broader environment he deeply cherished. With each story he shared, he hoped to inspire compassion towards wildlife while nurturing a commitment to preserving the delicate tapestry of life that surrounds us all. A legacy born from an extraordinary encounter along mountain trail.